students, welcome to the lecture on market structure. And after this lecture, we will be able to learn the following objectives. Explain the classification of market structure. Describe the monopoly. Explain the monopolistic competition. Understand the term oligopoly. Explain the characteristic of market. Let's start with the concept of market structure. A simple definition of this concept can be found in Paupas and Hursche. According to them, market structure refers to the number and size distribution of buyers and sellers in the market for a good or service. The market structure for a product not includes firms and individuals currently engaged in buying and selling, but also the potential entrants. In ordinary language, the term market refers to a public place in which goods and services are bought and sold. In economics, it has a different meaning. Different economists have tried to define market in different ways. Antonio Augustin Cournot defines market as not any particular marketplace in which things are bought and sold, but the whole of any region in which buyers and sellers are in such free intercourse with each other that the prices of the same goods tend to equality easily and quickly. Market means the general field within which the force determining the price of a particular product operates.
Now, cost curves are always going to look the same, but other elements like price, revenue, and demand will differ depending on the market structure that the business operates in. Are there lots of producers or only a few? Is my product just like everyone else's, or is it unique? The characteristics of a market will clue you in as to the type of market structure you're dealing with. Really, there's a continuum of market structures. Let's take a look. At one extreme, we have perfect competition. Well, if it's competitive, how many producers are we talking about? A lot. How many is a lot or a large number? Economists aren't really specific about this, but a large number of producers means that there are so many competitors that each one is too small to affect the market. In my mind, I tend to think of maybe 100 or more so that each competitor has 1% or less of the market. Since nothing you do affects the market, no one really cares what you do, and you're free to make decisions without worrying about how the competition will react. How else can I recognize a perfectly competitive market? Besides having a large number of sellers, each of those sellers will be producing exactly the same thing. In perfect competition, the product is identical or homogeneous or non-differentiated, no matter who produces it. One more characteristic, it's easy for firms to come and go from the industry. That is, there's free entry and exit. Think about it. This industry has lots of producers. Why? Because it's easy to get in and set up shop. In an industry like this, lots of producers all producing exactly the same thing, how much market power, where market power is defined as the ability to control the price, does an individual firm have? None. You have no ability to drive the price because 1, you're so small, and 2, everyone else produces exactly what you do. Time to think. What would happen if you tried to raise your price? Now let's take a look at the opposite extreme of the market structure spectrum. Instead of a huge number of producers, there's only one producer for the whole market, or a monopoly, the prefix mono meaning one. Furthermore, the monopolist's product is unique. There really are no substitutes for this product. Lastly, in a monopolistic industry, entry by other firms is nearly impossible due to the extremely high barriers to entry. We'll get into this more later, but a barrier to entry could be really high costs or legal protection like patents or copyrights. Given all of these characteristics, only one producer, a unique product, and no one else can get into the industry to compete with you, how much market power, ability to control price, does the monopoly producer have? The monopolist has complete control over the price within the boundaries of what consumers are willing to pay. Are there other structures? Sure. In fact, most real-world industries will fall somewhere in the middle ground, not at the theoretical extremes of perfect competition or monopoly. Two of these mid-range structures are monopolistic competition and oligopoly. A monopolistically competitive structure is still competitive, so there's still a lot of producers. Given that there are lots of producers, we can assume that entry into the industry is easy. Unlike perfect competition, however, the products are not exactly the same. Highly similar, yes. Highly substitutable, yes, but not identical. Think about, toothbrushes. You go to the store and there are toothbrushes with square heads, diamond heads, rubber grip handles, bi-level bristles, toothbrushes that play music, toothbrushes that glow in the dark, even with color indicators that tell you when to buy a new toothbrush. All toothbrushes, all highly similar and highly substitutable, but with slight differences. If I believe as a consumer that having a rubber grip handle helps clean my teeth better, then this differentiation gives the producer a small amount of market power. He or she could raise the price a little bit and I would still buy that rubber grip handle toothbrush. If they raise the price too much though, I'll switch to some other type of toothbrush. An oligopoly? Well, the prefix olig means few, so I'll have a few large producers making up the market, each with a large amount of control or market power. There are some barriers to entry, so it's hard, but not impossible, to get in. The product in an oligopolistic market can be identical, like the members of OPEC who produce oil, or differentiated, like car manufacturers. Also, the small number of producers could be just a handful, like cars, or a couple of dozen, like the oil producers. The key is that there are few enough producers that each one has a fairly large chunk of the market, large enough that any individual producer can affect what happens in the market. Because everyone's actions matter, the producers become mutually interdependent. Whatever one does affects everyone else. This mutual interdependence actually makes the oligopoly the most complicated type of market.
According to Benham, market is any area over which buyers and sellers are in close touch with one another, either directly or through dealers, that the price obtainable in one part of the market affects the prices paid in other parts. Stoner and Haig explain the term market as any organization whereby buyers and sellers of a good are kept in close touch with each other. There is no need for a market to be in a single building. Let us now discuss the classification of market structure. As there are many factors deciding on the market structure, there are many variations as well, determining the particular market structure in the economy. If we try to explore that individually, it might not crystallize the concept. Markets are traditionally classified into four basic types. These are: perfect competition is characterized by a large number of buyers and sellers of an essentially identical product. Monopoly. In this situation, there is just one producer of a product. The firm has substantial control over the price. Further, if product is differentiated and if there are no threats of new firms entering the same business, a monopoly firm can manage to earn excessive profits over a long period. Monopolistic competition. It is coined by E.M. Chamberlain, implies a market structure with a large number of firms selling differentiated products. The differentiation may be real or is perceived so by the customers. Two brands of soaps may just be identical, but perceived by customers as different on some fancy dimension like freshness. Firms in such a market structure have some control over price. Oligopoly. Oligopoly is a market structure in which a small number of firms account for the whole industry's output. The product may or may not be differentiated. Perfect competition. Though in concept perfect competition exists, however in real life only near perfect competition can exist. And the staple food and vegetables we buy from the market is perfect competition. However, when they start branding, they move toward oligopoly. Now moving on to the next topic, we will discuss the monopoly. The term monopoly is derived from Greek words mono, which means single, and poly, which means seller. So monopoly is a market structure where there are only a single seller producing a product having no close substitutes. This single seller may be in the form of an individual owner or a single partnership or a joint stock company. Such a single firm and market is called monopolist. Monopolist is price maker and has a control over the market supply of goods. but it does not mean that he can set both price and output level. Features of monopoly. The features or characteristics of monopoly are: a single seller has complete control over the supply of the commodity. There are no close substitutes for the product. There is no free entry and exit because of some restrictions. There is a complete negation of competition. Monopolist is a price maker. Since there is a single firm, the firm and industry are one and same, that is, firm coincides the industry. Monopoly firm faces downward sloping demand curve. It means he can sell more at low price and vice versa. Therefore, elasticity of demand factor is very important for him. Types of monopoly. Perfect monopoly. It is also called as absolute monopoly. In this case, there is only a single seller of product having no close substitute, not even remote one. There is absolutely zero level of competition. Such monopoly is practically very rare. Imperfect monopoly. It is also called as relative monopoly or simple or limited monopoly. It refers to a single seller market having no close substitute. It means in this market a product may have a remote substitute. So there is fear of competition to some extent. That is mobile, cell phone, telecom industry, example Vodafone, is having competition from fixed landline phone service industry. Private monopoly. When production is owned, controlled and managed by the individual or private body or private organization, it is called private monopoly. Public monopoly. When production is owned, controlled and managed by government, it is called public monopoly. It is welfare and service oriented, so it is also called as welfare monopoly, example railways, defense, etc. Natural monopoly. It emerges as a result of natural advantages like good location, abundant mineral resources, etc. Example, Gulf countries are having monopoly in crude oil exploration activities because of plenty of natural oil resources. Potential benefits from monopoly. The debate about monopoly will never be settled. The consensus seems to be the economic case for and against monopoly needs to be judged on a case-by-the-case basis, particularly when assessing the impact on economic welfare. The standard economic case against monopoly is that with the same cost structure, a monopoly supplier will produce at a lower output and charge a higher price than a competitive industry. This leads to a net loss of economic welfare and efficiency because price is driven above marginal cost, leading to allocate inefficiency. Can monopoly be defended? Monopoly and economies of scale, because monopoly producers are often supplying goods and services on a very large scale. They may be better placed to take advantage of economies of scale, leading to a fall in the average total costs of production. Price discrimination. Are there potential welfare improvements from price discrimination? Some forms of price discrimination benefit certain consumers. The key terms in monopoly are monopsony. In monopsony, there is only one buyer of the product, service. The other characteristics are same as monopoly. Government monopoly. In government monopoly, the government reserves the venture for it, also known as legal monopoly, government granted monopoly. It is sanctioned by the state government to encourage the investors in a risky project or venture. Monopolistic competition. When there are large numbers of firms in the market selling differentiated products which are close substitute of each other, it is known as monopolistic competition. It is a blend of monopoly and competition where the entry of new firm is relatively simple and open. Natural monopoly. It exists when the product is for a niche market and a single firm can satisfy the entire market demand through economies of scale. If any competitor enters the market, the price decreases since the total supply increases and both the firm suffers losses. Monopolistic competition. Monopolistic competition refers to a market structure that is a cross between the two extremes of perfect competition and monopoly. The model allows for the presence of increasing returns to scale in production and for differentiated rather than homogeneous or identical products. However, the model retains many features of perfect competition such as the presence of many firms in the industry and the likelihood that free entry and exit of firms in response to profit would eliminate economic profit among the firms. As a result, the model offers a somewhat more realistic depiction of many common economic markets. The model is especially useful in explaining the motivation for intra-industry trade, that is, trade between countries that occurs within an industry rather than across industries. In other words, the model can explain why some countries export and import automobiles simultaneously. Assumptions of monopolistic competition. A monopolistically competitive market has features which represent a cross between a perfectly competitive market and a monopolistic market, hence the name. Some of the main assumptions of the model are: many firms produce in a monopolistically competitive industry. This assumption is similar to that found in a model of perfect competition. Each firm produces a product which is differentiated, that is, different in character from all other products produced by the other firms in the industry. Monopolistically competitive industry effects. Assume that there are two countries, each with a monopolistically competitive industry producing a differentiated product. Suppose initially that the two countries are in autarky. For convenience, we will assume that the firms in the industry are symmetric relative to the other firms in the industry. Symmetry implies that each firm has the same average and marginal cost functions and that the demand curves for every firm's product are identical, although we still imagine that each firm produces a product that is differentiated from all others. Benefits of free trade under monopolistic competition. Welfare of individual consumers who purchase this product will be enhanced for three main reasons. First, trade increases the number of varieties of products for consumers to choose. Second, free trade reduces the prices of every variety sold in the market. Third, free trade may increase the supply of products in other markets and result in low prices for those products. Costs of free trade. Under monopolistic competition, there are two potential costs of free trade in this model. The movement to free trade requires adjustment in the industry in both countries. Although firm output rises, productive efficiency rises as well. A second potential cost of free trade arises if one questions the assumption that more variety is always preferred by consumers. Oligopoly. A market structure characterized by a small number of large firms that dominate the market, selling either identical or differentiated products with significant barriers to entry into the industry. This is one of the four basic market structures. The other three are perfect competition, monopoly, and monopolistic competition. Oligopoly dominates the modern economic landscape, accounting for about half of all output produced in the economy. Oligopolistic industries are as diverse as they are widespread, ranging from breakfast cereal to cars, from computers to aircraft, from television broadcasting to pharmaceuticals, from petroleum to detergent. Characteristics of oligopoly. The three most important characteristics of oligopoly are an industry dominated by a small number of large firms. Firms sell either identical or differentiated products. The industry has significant barriers to entry. Behavior of oligopoly. Although oligopolistic industries tend to be diverse, they also tend to exhibit several behavioral tendencies. Interdependence. Rigid prices. Interdependence. Each oligopolistic firm keeps a close eye on the activities of other firms in the industry. Rigid prices. Many oligopolistic industries, not all but many, tend to keep prices relatively constant, preferring to compete in ways that do not involve changing the price. Benefits of oligopoly. With the bad comes a little good. The two most noted goods from oligopoly are, by developing product innovations, taking advantage of economies of scale.
In an oligopoly, you would find only a small number of sellers, that is, few enough so that any individual seller can affect the market, and the firm's actions will have an impact on all the other sellers. The product can be either the same, like oil, or differentiated, like automobiles, and there are fairly high barriers to entry. Time to think. Having seen the other market structures, you should be able to make some predictions about the implications of the oligopoly characteristics. What will prices and output look like? What is the potential for profit? As you'd expect, the oligopoly market structure will result in a higher price than either competitive market, although not so high as a monopoly, and will be able to maintain some profit if it exists into the long run because of the barriers to entry. At the beginning of this video, I said that the oligopoly is the most complex market structure. Well, that's because the actions of any one firm will have an impact on all of the other players in the market. This mutual interdependence among firms means that each firm keeps an eye on everyone else, trying not only to anticipate moves, but also to have their own reaction plan in place. Will the other guy raise his price? Lower his price? If he makes a move, what will I do? You can see the increased complexity of this market just by looking at the oligopolistic firm's demand, a kinked demand curve. We've never encountered a demand curve that looks like this before, so what gives? Well, this demand is effectively composed of two different demand curves because the game playing behavior, if you will, of the firms in this industry will change depending on whether the firm is implementing a price increase or a price decrease. When the oligopolistic firm goes to increase its price, the rivals will not follow. They will let that one firm increase its price, and then they will gain the customers as buyers are driven away by the initiating firm's higher prices. What this means for the firm is that if it raises its price and no other producer follows suit, then the initiating firm will see a large decrease in quantity demanded, i.e., the demand is more elastic when the firm attempts to increase its price. Well, what if the firm lowers its price? The rivals are aware that they could lose substantial market share if they do not follow along and lower their prices as well. But what happens if everyone lowers prices? The firm that initiated the price decrease would see very little change in quantity demanded because, for the most part, customers stay where they are. That is, the demand faced by the firm is inelastic when there is a price decrease. So if the firm raises price, no rivals follow, it loses a lot of customers, the demand is elastic. But if it lowers its price, everyone follows, and not much is gained by that firm in terms of sales, or you have inelastic demand. This will also result in a very unusual marginal revenue curve. Think about the marginal revenue that would be associated with the more elastic price increase scenario. Then consider the marginal revenue that would be associated with the more inelastic price decrease demand. The marginal revenue associated with the kinked demand curve would look like this. It's important at this point to be confident in what you know about a firm's profit maximizing behavior. Is this the weirdest looking demand marginal revenue graph you've ever seen? Sure. Can you still figure out the profit maximizing output? Definitely. You have the profit maximizing rule burned into your brain by now, don't you? All you need is the output where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Marginal cost looks the same regardless of the market structure, so you just add it to the oligopolistic firm's demand diagram. You can find Q star, the output where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and then use the demand curve to determine the highest price the firm can get the consumers to pay for those Q star units. From here, the analysis is the same as any other market structure. In the short run, the firm could make money, lose money, or break even, depending on the position of the average cost curves. If the firm makes money in the short run, the barriers to entry help to protect these profits, even in the long run. Remember, in an oligopoly market structure, it is difficult but not impossible to enter the market, so there may be some loss of profit to new rivals over time. If the firm loses money in the short run, it will exit the industry in the long run, leaving behind more customers for the rival firms. So, in the end, how does the oligopoly compare to the other market structures? As expected, the oligopolistic firm can maintain profit into the long run, but the profits earned aren't quite as high as the monopoly could earn.
Characteristic of market. The number of firms and product differentiation are extremely crucial in determining the nature of competition in a market. It has been tactically assumed that there are a large number of buyers. What would happen if there are several firms producing a standardized product but only one buyer? Obviously, the buyer on a different qualitative dimension. Similarly, product features and characteristics, the nature of production system, the possibility of new entrants in a market have profound impact on the competitive behavior of firms in a market. Production characteristics. Minimum efficient scale of production in relation to the overall industry output and market requirements sometimes play a major role in shaping the market structure. Why there are no more than, say, 5 or 10 integrated steel plants even in an advanced country like the USA can be partly explained by this factor. Since the minimum economic size of such a steel plant is few million tons, the entire world's steel industry can have no more than JOO efficient and profitable firms. Thus, every country has only a handful of steel plants. On the other hand, when one comes to re-rolling mills which take the steel billets or bars as input, the minimum efficient size comes down considerably, and given the existing demand, several firms can be seen to operate. Further, the minimum size does not remain constant but changes drastically with technological advancements. When technical changes push up the economic size of a plant, one notices that the number of firms decline over time. This can be noticed in some process industries like synthetic fiber. Conversely, technological innovations may make it possible for smaller size plants to become economically viable. In such a case, a lot of new entrants come and soon the market becomes highly competitive. Notice the personal computer's entry. Apart from minimum plant size factors like availability of the required raw material, skilled labor, etc. can also wood the market structure. Product characteristics. The given example refer to market situations with CTV and detergent powder as product examples. Both these markets have many firms and the products are differentiated. But in case of CTV, there are no close substitutes, BWTV being a poor one, whereas there are many substitutes to a detergent powder, bar soaps, chips cakes. Therefore, one notices more violent competition in the detergent market than in the CTV market. In the CTV industry, firms are competing with each other's products, but in the detergent market, the firms are competing with other substitute products as well. Of course, we may remind of the customer income constraint, but even with that, there should be no difficulty in appreciating the differences in the degree of competitiveness in these two markets. Similarly, when two locations are connected by road and rail, firms engaged in passenger bus service are not only competing with themselves but also with an alternate mode of transport. The physical characteristics of a product can also influence the competitive structure of its market. If the distribution cost is a major element in the cost of a product, competition would tend to get localized. Within a given region, firms would compete and make attempts to set up several plants around all the major markets in a bid to show their presence in all the territories. Similarly, for perishable products, the competition is invariably local. Conflict between physical characteristics and minimum economic size. An interesting question arises in the case of a product like cement. For reason of minimizing the transport costs on raw materials, most cement plants in the country are located near mine sites. A large, efficient plant near a mine site can manufacture cement at the optimum cost, but the local demand is never large enough. If such a plant has to sell in faraway markets, the transport costs can be quite high. Customers located in such areas will always buy cement at a much higher price. The government partly offsets this by using the mechanism of levy price, which is the same throughout the country. Now in the end, let us summarize what we have learnt in this lecture. Market structure refers to the number and size distribution of buyers and sellers in the market for a good or service. Oligopoly is a market structure in which a small number of firms account for the whole industry's output. The term monopoly is derived from Greek words mono, which means single, or poly, which means seller. So monopoly is a market structure where there are only a single seller producing a product having no close substitutes. Monopolistic competition refers to a market structure that is a cross between the two extremes of perfect competition and monopoly. A monopolistically competitive market has features which represent a cross between a perfectly competitive market and a monopolistic market.